Hello, I'm here talking to Jordan Durante. We're talking about what we believe to be a theft and a fraud, and we'll let Jordan put this into his own words. So, Jordan, tell me as concisely as you can what I know a good bit about this story, of course, um, but why don't you summarize in a few sentences what you believe to have happened?
Well, I mean, first of all, I was living in Spain and I did a collaboration with another individual that you know quite well now. And that led on to me sort of believing and uncovering, a vast a fraud that involves trusts and my grandfather's missing assets. So the night he was murdered, his safe was left open. And we can discuss that shortly, really. I've sent you a selection of emails that we're about to sort of discuss shortly, which will explain exactly what this video is about. And what I allege is huge police corruption that has gone on since my grandfather's murder to this current date. Um, so perhaps maybe I can start talking about the emails I've sent you, Eugene.
Yes, absolutely. And just for the record, what we should say is that Jordan's grandfather, James William Durant, was brutally murdered in October 1988. Nothing was stolen. He was attacked so violently that he had to be identified by dental records and so forth. Now, the
Well, I don't know if that was exactly true. I mean, I know he had been hit about the head, but I'm not too sure about having to be identified by dental records, just to
ah
put that bit straight.
Okay,
Yeah.
I thought I'd come across that in some of the documentation. Okay, well, either way, he
He
was.
might he might have said that in a newspaper report, but also just one other thing: there was the wallet taken from his body, and in the newspaper report it says miscellaneous papers as well. So,
Yeah,
what were those papers that were taken? I allege I found them now from the missing safe.
yeah,
So perhaps if we start with the first email I've sent you over, so this is my contact on the 10th of May, 2021. Um, just a few months before that, I had been calling the police from Spain, explaining my grandfather's murder and that I found new evidence. The police threatened to arrest over 9 months. Well, sorry, not 9 months, quite a few months, stating that the murder, didn't exist and I was a fantasist. I eventually found the news clip of my grandfather's murder and kept ringing. And eventually, one of the officers said, "How do we stop you keep calling?" And I said, "Well, watch this news clip to show that this murder did exist." They
yeah.
eventually then watched the news clip and put me through to this person at the Historical Murder Squad in London. And as you can see, or that I've highlighted at the bottom of her email, she says, "Also, I'd like to discuss if you have an inquiry regarding uh, your grandfather's murder. At the moment, with the limited information I cannot locate on your grandfather's murder investigation, was this a unsolved murder or a solved murder?" So surely a lady at the Historical Murder Squad should really know about my grandfather's murder, I would presume.
Yeah, well, you would hope
Or
so.
yeah, certainly, Eugene. And then over on the next page, this is from the Isle of Jersey police, and I was dealing with a fraud that I've alleged that's taken place there. And this police officer is asking me for information on which police force has my grandfather's murder case. Then you can see an email from me basically saying I'm quite worried, handing that information over to you. What are you going to discuss? She then asks for the email address of the officer, which I eventually give this lady. And then pretty much very shortly afterwards, I get contacted and told that my grandfather's murder inquiry is now being shut down after I'd had all those efforts to try and get it open. Um, yeah, so I mean, it was an appalling state being shouted at, by the police for many months, but eventually getting it open. The other police forces that are supposed to be investigating the frauds that I've alleged clearly liaised with the Metropolitan Police and they've shut down the case. But one of the most important emails that I've shown you here, Eugene, is where you will see on the 19th of July 2021, one of the police officers from the historical murder squad writes to me and says two things. He says the names of the people in business with your grandfather. Then he says the documents that were missing from the safe that was open. So he's agreeing with me in 2021 that the safe was open. And then again in 2021 on the 28th of July, this officer writes to me and says, I have been looking into the names you provided and information around the safe. I'm just waiting for one other piece of information. So clearly the information that I supplied in 2021 had some significance. Now, Eugene, you and I know that I'm now sort of 2 years into my work and I've uncovered a hell of a lot more with details. Yeah, with detailed investigations, and I visited people and they've signed witness statements with ex-police, Section 9 witness statements. So I'm on the right track. And what's happening now, which is going to be a shocker to the public, is amazingly now my grandfather's safe on the 6th of March 2023. I'll read you what this officer has said. As I stated earlier in my email, I will review my position in relation to disclosure of material which suggests that the safe was closed. Now, you know, this is mental how a safe can be open and shut, in my view, to protect the island's financial reputation, Eugene.
Yeah.
So I've talked there for a minute. Over to you if you've got some questions sort of relating to that.
Okay, well, as you know, I contacted the Metropolitan Police, who really didn't give me any answers. If I recall correctly, they told me that the case was listed but not active, whatever that means, and that it was an unsolved murder. But they showed no willingness to investigate any further, particularly in the light of new allegations that you wanted to make. I think we should mention for the readers, your grandfather had been very active in the 50s and 60s and even early in the 70s in persuading high net worth individuals to do their banking on Jersey.
Correct,
now,
yeah.
We're not going to pretend your grandfather was any kind of saint particularly, but it was clearly a tax avoidance project that he was working on. But by dint of his work, he had become a pretty wealthy man. So at the time that he was murdered, what happened to his money? Now, what we have learned is that a dodgy trust fund was set up in 1975, and
1978, yeah, 1978, that one.
No, the first one, the signed one I'm talking about. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, the owners of the trust service provider now are saying, oh, well, no, it was legitimate because it was, agreed by the appointer to the trust. Well, the trust they're relying on dates to 1978 and is effectively unsigned. The trust that they did manage to get signed was from earlier, 1975. And the chap who signed as the appointer, who later became the trustee, we actually tracked him down and we did a video with him recently in which he said, look, I was active in the Freemason movement, as was your grandfather, and I was asked to sign a trust deed that would ensure money could be given to Freemason charities, such as the Freemason School in, I think it's in Hertfordshire, just outside London.
Yeah.
So, I was acting in good faith. I signed it in 1975. I was 23 years old. I didn't really know what was going on. And then I never heard anything about it again until nearly 50 years later. And suddenly he's being pursued by the Dutch tax authorities for a trust that he knows nothing about. But
yeah,
in any case,
it's great. I mean, but going back to the police corruption mainly, this is what this video is about, is the anti-corruption line that Sir Mark Rowley set up And I called them maybe 5 or 6 times over a period of 3 or 4 months before Christmas and sort of just leading up to the new year or whatever. And no one ever called me back. And then I managed to get into the Surrey Live newspaper, who kindly came and interviewed me and did an article. The Metropolitan Police were contacted by them for their comment, and what they said is any new evidence that's brought to the table, we would certainly investigate. And I'd like the public to know that they've not interviewed this Dutch individual that you've just mentioned, that I went to Holland to find on my own. And they accused me of actually committing fraud with his witness statements. And I said, well, ring him, speak to him. I mean, you can just see the lengths of what I'm doing, but the lengths of what the Metropolitan Police, in my view, are doing is stopping me to get access to justice. They're not interviewing the new witnesses. And there's another person behind my grandfather's house where allegedly $74 million was paid back to. I've knocked on that individual's door and managed to get in contact with the original accountant named in those documents, and she signed a Section 9 witness statement with ex-police. And the police won't speak to the ex-police who've taken the witness statements and then accuse me of fraud. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, why was I treated so badly when I've tried to hand in the evidence? I had to go and meet a security guard in Putney and give him the evidence because the officer wouldn't speak to me. No receipt given to me. I travelled to then Kingston police station and they happily took the dossier off of me and shook my hand and gave me a receipt. Look at the attitude that's, between the two sort of police stations.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. So they have an objective to stop me proving that the safe was open. So my father actually found the body that night, and he'll be doing a video with you shortly, Eugene, as a living witness. And we asked the police again to take it very seriously and interview my father. We've asked for his interview tapes when he was questioned because he found the body, and they said they won't release them. He's entitled to them, but they've decided they won't give them to us because in that it proves the safe is open. Now, all of the investigating officers in my notes and documents I have here said that they wanted to follow the money and it was a financially motivated murder. Now, the Metropolitan Police knew that I was going to say that in the Isle of Man court recently, and I find it very strange that we now have a UK judge coming over. So, you can see the lengths of what they're doing. What they need to do is say sorry and approach the family. And for example, if the safe is shut that night my grandfather's murdered, then it has nothing to do with the murder because you're stopping my family getting their rightful inheritance since 1988. And I think that's fair comment, isn't it? So
yes,
right. I mean, the other thing I'd like to mention, if possible, just while I remember it, Eugene, is Mr. Paul Blanchard. I've got his book here, and it's called Wanted. I collaborate with him. He's an absolutely lovely guy, and he's trying to fight to access justice at New Scotland Yard as well. So I collaborate with him. Please have a look at his book and follow his story as well, which is intertwines to a certain degree with sort of police corruption and trying to fight for justice. Over to you, Eugene. I'm trying to think there's anything else to sort of add.
No, I think the only thing we should probably mention here is you touched on it, that there is a case active, proceedings are active on the Isle of Man, whereby you are now suing the present owners of what we say is the corrupt trust fund, who
no, that's slightly different. We have to be careful by wording. There's one individual who's the executor of my grandparents' estate, who's failed to administer that in 34 odd years. I managed to get my family from what we allege is the corrupt trust in the other jurisdiction, their first payment from the unsigned trust deed that named the Masons as beneficiaries when it's really our family's money. So I managed to get the first payment from the unsigned deed, which no lawyer or that individual in the Isle of Man managed to do in 34 odd years, nor get accounts. for all of the companies in Jersey. So we have to keep the two individuals slightly separate, but also the individual is the executor of both the estates. So,
Yeah.
we'll have to wait and see what comes out in court further.
Okay, and do we have what's the latest date you've been given for the hearing?
So hopefully one day in April we should be given the date for trial. And obviously at the moment my family sadly have sat two advocates through this process for not doing what they're told. That's how I'll phrase that, or following my father's instructions as their client. So I actually now represent my bloodline in court without any lawyers. So if there's any good lawyers out there that want to get involved, please jump on board. We're looking for perhaps a UK lawyer now, and would apply for a TAL, a temporary advocate license from the court.
Okay. Good. All right. Well, look, I think that sums it up. We're alleging, well, you're alleging rather, that many millions of pounds that should really have been the property of your family appear to have disappeared without any proper trace or records, and nobody seems to be taking it seriously. And it links back to your deeper conviction that yes, corruption does exist on Jersey and the Isle of Man, and which we know anyway from the data dumps that were characterized as the Paradise Papers and the Panama Papers.
Which have been a great use to me over the last 3 years, because my family's companies are mentioned in those.
Yes. Okay. So, well, look, thanks for giving us an overview there of where you're coming from, and I'm going to speak to your dad now. Yes.
Yes, I'll have a word with him and see if he's available shortly.
Okay. Cool.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Jordan.
All the best, you.
Speak to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.